Hello. You watch But Developer channel. I am here developing a large and hopefully popular portal for the music industry. In this video I will tell you how to debug a Laravel project locally and on the server. Before starting, Russia is an aggressor and a terrorist country. Support Ukraine, don't believe Russia propaganda. If you are already a supporter, I am very grateful to you, thank you. Thanks to you, I and many Ukrainians are alive. Thank you, please don't stop. I will start with the local work. I don't use Xdebug, not because I can't set it up, to a greater extent because I try to write code that will not cause the desire to install Xdebug. You do what you want, but at the interviews, of course, say that you use Xdebug. This is an unspoken rule. For Laravel Telescope package was enough for me. This is a very cool set of tools which covers absolutely everything you need for the Laravel project. Just one tip. Don't use it in production. Please never use Laravel Telescope in production. In the meantime, I will set up the telescope and I will give some advice that differs from the documentation. So I go to the official documentation, select local only installation. It is important, local only, install as composer dev dependency, development, PHP Artisan Telescope install. It will publish telescope config file and telescope web view dashboard. And of course the telescope migration file. So PHP Artisan migrate, remove telescope service provider from config app file providers section and move it to app service provider, but only if environment is local. And finally go to composer JSON file, section extra laravel.discover and add laravel/telescope and go to localhost/telescope. All work perfect. Here I will change the focus a little. As you can see, the telescope is already recording request on the up route. It is normal, it is a Docker health check, but it is not normal that there are 3 of them at once. After a bit of debugging, I found that the merging of the Docker compose yum file didn't work on health check. Not all merging, but overwrite. And it's happened because of to-do comments. I fixed it. I also fixed the text version of the Docker video. Please be careful if you set up Docker using my video. But I don't want to see this request in a telescope at all. It is useless spam that interferes with debugging. So go to config telescope PHP file, ignore pass sections and add simple app without slash. Below is the ignore commands section. It will be necessary to add a health check commands there. Go to request list and all good. Refresh, works, 0 new request to app route. Cool. Next one. The documentation says that you need to publish the WebView resources when you update the composer. But I recommend adding the directory public vendor to the gitingore file and add the publish command to the composer install hook. This applies to absolutely all packages that have a WebView resource files. My solutions will allow the team to avoid commit and reviewing a bunch of minified JavaScript, HTML and CSS files. It will save the production from getting a telescope there and other local only packages, and it is important that it will not affect the developers in any way. On the contrary, they will always have an up-to-date versions. Of course, the packages that we use in production must be published as step of CI/CD script. For resource publications, you need to look at the tag. Telescope and Horizon have the same tag, Laravel assets, so I don't need to do anything. You look at your code. Okay, go next. Telescope has a very useful integration with the dump command. It should work like this. You open Telescope dump page, write a dump helper in your code with some variable, and the variable dump does not go to the request, but goes to the dump page. But unfortunately, it only works if file is driver cache for all Laravel project. This issue has existed for many years, and still it is not solved. But if you go to telescope config file, watchers dump watchers config and set always to true, it will start working, even if the page is closed. Of course, this breaks the default dump behavior, but almost no one uses it, and working with the telescope is very useful. So I leave it like that, but we'll write it to .env example file. And one more, the telescope fills the database very quickly. Plus 20 gigabytes in a week with active work happens. So don't forget, app console kernel, schedule a function, add comment. Telescope Prune 38-hour, run daily. This will delete all records older than 2 days. I finished with Telescope. I highly recommend using it, very useful, especially when the frontend is separated from the backend, or client separated from the backend. But in the production we also want to monitor and debug everything. For monitoring, I recommend external projects such as Sentry or New Relic. There will be a separated video about this someday. And for debugging, use logs. But reading logs from the server is not useful, and I'm support minimizing the number of people who have access to the server, no matter staging, production or something else. I use Laravel log view package to read the logs on the server. The package is very useful, support many types of logs, Nginx, Laravel, Superwizard, everything. Allows you to delete logs and configure access for deletion. Very easy to install, just one reminder. It is necessary to publish the web view during the update and installation composer, if you added public vendor to gitingore. And that is all for log viewer. Just go to /logviewer route, work with log files from web interface. One tip for logs in Laravel: immediately switch the channel to daily. Go to config login PHP file, find stack channel and switch channel to daily. Laravel will create a new log file every day if there is something to log. This makes working with logs much easier, no matter on local machine or in the production. Of course, it is more correct to change the channel to daily in .env file, but I often set up my own log channels for specific issues, and personally it is more useful for me to write this way. The next part is the most important technical part of this video. You must understand that logs contain sensitive information. This could be your users' data, and definitely be information that will allow to hack your project. And the same information could be in your queue service. In my case, Laravel Horizon. So the rule: close everything that only developers need from ordinary users. If you're a company, simply block access without a corporate VPN. If you don't have a VPN, set up it immediately. This is a mandatory safety condition. Access by VPN IP allows you to not be afraid that the released developer will hack the project, and you don't need to think so you need to change password or remove show access. But if you are a poor developer like me, use package Laravel very basic aus. Simple install, publish config file, and add to .env file two variables: basic aus password and basic aus user. If they are empty, basic aus not working. So to .env.example save empty basic aus. Developers don't have to log in on local machine. Next, for log viewer, I have to publish log viewer config file and add to middleware block very basic aus middleware class. Also, don't forget add to API middleware, because log viewer use API route too. And simple test: go to log viewer and we got basic HTTP aus window, enter username, test and passwords test, and now we have access to log viewer. Cool. But we need to check API, open some API call, copy path and open in private window, and all cool. I have to enter login and password, and I do this same trick for Horizon. Go to config file, middleware, and add basic aus. Go to Horizon root and it asks me credentials. Just in case, I check if Horizon has an API calls. Looks like no, so all good. But this is not the end. Such authorization is dangerous, and there may well be intruders who will try to break it. But we can make it difficult for them by simply changing the route to the Horizon, to the log viewer and other services. In Horizon config exists property path. If I change it, for example, for path1, /Horizon will not work, but /Horizon path1 will work. So I advise you to use some not obvious hash for production, charter set and etc. This will save you from vulnerability scanners. And the same trick do for a log viewer, but config option is root path, and of course I recommend replace it to .env variable. I finished. Thank you. Be safe.